How are you?
I'm good. How are you? Will they be able to see us, or is this just radio?
They're
Because I feel like
they're filming us.
okay, so they should know that they can see our matching shirts. That was not planned
Yeah, that's right. We are,
at
for people who
all.
were listening on the radio, we are both wearing Canadian, what do you call these things? Red and black checkered thing?
Yeah, plaid. Like I don't know. Plaid, yeah,
We do. We look like Bob and Doug McKenzie.
yeah.
And you know what I didn't mention? I didn't mention in the introduction that you're Canadian.
Yes, I am
From
very
where?
proud. I was originally born in Rome. My father's Italian, my mother's Canadian, and they kind of split up when I was young. And my mother decided to bring me back to Canada to raise me, where she was from. And I grew up in Parry Sound till I was about 16 years old, a couple hours north of Toronto. For high school, I moved to Toronto, the North York area, so Bayview, York Mills. I went to Cardinal Carter as an arts high school in Toronto, and that's sort of where all the sort of creative juices started flowing for me.
Well, it's lovely to have you. How did you feel when I played the theme song?
For the Grey's Anatomy song,
Yeah.
yeah, it sparks a lot of memories. It's been a wild ride. I feel like I've like blinked and 7 years have gone by. So it's kind of surreal to be here on the other side of this show, which I didn't know how long I was going to be on. Originally, I was just hired, as a guest star for a couple episodes, and then it turned into so much more. And yeah, and then beyond that, as an actor now, I've gotten to direct on the show and plan to do more of that here in Hollywood. So I've just grown immensely in so many different ways and facets since then. I'm just a completely different person.
How did you find out you were going from guest star to main cast?
My executive producer, Debbie Allen, who's one of the most magical women I've ever met in my life, she just said, "Honey, get yourself an apartment. You're staying." And I was like, "Okay." I was like, "What does that mean?" She's like, "We want you part of the regular cast, so you got to live here now. So get yourself an apartment. You live here now." And I was like, "Oh God." I was like, "Okay, all right," because I'd just been bouncing around in Airbnbs, for probably about 6 months, 5 or 6 months. Just, I kept kind of packing my bag at the end of every couple of weeks, and then they kept being like, "Oh no, we want you in the next one too." And I'd be like, "Okay." So then I'd like unpack my bag again, and I sort of went through that for like 5 months. And then finally they said, "No, we want to make you a part of the show." And so I was like, "Great." And then it was kind of surreal because the whole time in my head I was like, "This is just a gig, just like any other, and I'm heading back to Toronto when I'm done." And it was weird to say, "No, no, no, like you have the job, like this is like a long running thing for you, and you have to live here now." I hadn't even kind of considered it because I think as actors you have to build up such thick skin because you get so many doors in the face, you get so many no's, that you always have to have this kind of like, "Oh yeah, of course I'm fired," or "Yeah, of course I like this is over, of course I'm going on to the next thing." I always have to be ready for the next thing. So when something actually kind of pans out, it's surprising, it's shocking, and surreal. So and before that, I'm classically trained theater actor, so I was doing plays all over. TV and film was a relatively new thing for me. So once I started breaking into television and film, it was always small little jobs. So this was my first really long-standing job that I'd ever had in my career.
Is it, I mean, there's the joy of getting the long standing job. There's the joy of not having to pack your bag every couple of weeks and kind of knowing what you're going to be doing for a little while. But the show was so big by the time you joined it. Was it
Mhm.
intimidating at all?
Sure. I mean, I think the intimidating thing was just more how large the cast was. You know what I mean? Normally on like most shows, it's like a tighter cast. And so it's about kind of 3 or 4 characters' lives and how interconnected they are. Our show is an ensemble show. So we have like, 10 main characters that all, are, equally as important. And the writers all work very hard to kind of space out all their characters equally and try to get, all of their characters advancing throughout the season. But it's a big job for the writers. And I think, for each character has their sort of like little bit of screen time per episode to advance their character forward. And it's sort of hard to find. I think the intimidating thing for me was what is lacking, right? Like what character isn't on the show. So how can I be what's missing? How can I be filling a gap or a hole? And so the first year or so for me on my own as a personal journey, and also with the writers, was like, how does DeLuca stick out? You know what I mean? What is he bringing to the table that none of the other characters have? Just like what is other characters bringing that I don't have? And, you know.
And what was the answer?
Well, I think it was, he was really headstrong and ambitious and kind of like a little bit ahead of his class. He was always kind of a step or two ahead of his peers, going above and beyond to kind of accomplish his goals. So that was something that I really kind of stuck onto, and someone who kind of took I think a lot of the interesting part of the show is how these incredibly busy, demanding people also balance a personal life and balance love and balance being parents and things like that, because these jobs as healthcare workers, as surgeons, are so demanding. And I think DeLuca kind of in a different way was so married to his work, was so married to his job, that like romance and personal relationships were kind of like in a way difficult to maintain because he was so obsessed with his work. So that was something that I kind of gravitated towards.
Could you relate?
Definitely. Yeah. And I've been asked that before. And I think that is a common thread between DeLuca and I, that, we are very like ambitious and passionate about what we do, and relentless and workaholics and like late nights and always just trying to. It's funny. I was in watching, kind of preparing for this interview, I was watching some of your work, and I saw an interview you did with Sting, and the amazing Sting from the Police. Which is so cool, by the way. Like, your job is so amazing.
Yeah, it's
cool. It's like
wild. It is wild. And Sting was terrifying and lovely and wonderful and all that stuff. Yeah, he's a cat,
But he said, there's this amazing euphoria that kind of comes over you when you finish writing a song. And it's like the greatest feeling in the world. And it lasts about 20 minutes. And then he said, but then I'm like, well, what the fuck is the next song? Now I'm thinking about the next song. And I related to that so much as an actor and as an artist just in general. Like, you work hard, you do meetings with like executives or casting directors, and you sort of vie for your chance to audition for a role, then you get it. And then like, your agent or your manager or whatever calls you saying, Giacomo, you got the job, you'll be playing this person, you're flying to Morocco next week and starting this movie or whatever. And the first emotion, which is that sort of like euphoria that Sting mentioned, is like amazing. Like, oh my God, like I'm continuing my career. I got this job. But then immediately after, my mind is flooded like with what's the next thing? Now what? Now what's next? You know what I mean? I can almost never really truly enjoy what I'm doing, because I'm always thinking about the next thing. But that's something that I fight and I actively know, and I have to remind myself to sort of be present and more aware and all those things. But, you do have those kind of instinctual reactions of always trying to get the next thing.
What about the ways you might not relate to the character, which I think is a challenge for an actor that I find really interesting. And for people who don't know your character, he had a pretty major arc that delved into mental health and being bipolar. And I should say it's a grand assumption by me to say that you wouldn't relate to that. And maybe I apologize if that's not the case. But how do you go wrapping your head around a character like that, but also representing something like that truthfully and honestly?
I guess in a call it fortunate way, I grew up around a lot of mental health. A lot of people in my family and friends and very, very close circle have suffered from great mental illnesses, including bipolar. So it's something I'm very familiar with, very up close, very personal to me. And even though this wasn't something that I necessarily requested, as some actors often do of their showrunners, like, hey, could you make this storyline about this for my character? Because I didn't pitch this. This just kind of like landed. And it was kind of shocking to me, because I was like, whoa, this is like very close to home for me. and I know a lot about this subject. So when it came around, at first it was a little daunting because it was like, oh God, do I want to delve into all those personal things? But in a way, it was cathartic, and it was. I felt like I had a responsibility, and certainly, after shooting all this stuff and it coming out, seeing kind of what a beacon it was for a lot of people who were struggling and people that related to it and felt seen and felt represented. That was a huge honor, and probably one of the greatest honors of my career thus far, of just receiving overwhelming amounts of messages from fans saying like, thank you. I suffer from bipolar, whether it was bipolar 1 or bipolar 2, and where they were rapid cycling, and they were like talking about, oftentimes how bipolar characters are depicted on screen, and that they're not relatable, or they're like in and out of institutions. There's no end in sight. Whereas DeLuca, in this, by the beginning of this season, we had seen him promoted, we had seen him medicated, we had seen him doing therapy, dieting, exercising, getting good rest, all things that are, a balanced diet for someone suffering from mental health. That doesn't eliminate the problem, but certainly makes your life much more rich and manageable. And so these are the kind of things that we were trying to offer and tell people. And in terms of representation, you have someone who's suffering from bipolar, who is an attending at a hospital, who was a surgeon, who is holding people's lives in his hands. Tremendous responsibility, tremendous power. And so to hopefully give hope that other people suffering from a variety of mental illnesses too can achieve, great, amazing, satisfying careers. And they don't have to be crippled by these mental illnesses. So these are the messages that we were trying to put forward, and I was very happy to know that they were received so well.
How's the fandom? Honestly, is it a bit intense? Does it ever get a bit weird?
Sometimes. I mean, it is, like you said, like when I joined, it was already a tremendous show. And so joining that, you really do join this massive fandom. People who grew up watching it are now watching it with their kids, because now that's how long it's been on, and sort of re-enjoying it for a second time in a new way, and watching the experience transpire through their children's eyes and remembering when they first saw that episode or that moment. And so people really love the show, and it's globally successful. I would say in many ways, because I've traveled a lot in these 7 years that I've been on the show, that it's more successful elsewhere than in America, in North America. You know what I mean? I also come from Italy, as I mentioned. And when I returned to Italy, it's like, it's huge in Italy.
What do you mean?
Gigantic.
What does that mean for you day to day when you're going to get a cup of coffee or something like that?
Yeah, going to get a cup of coffee in LA is like not so much of a big deal. You might get recognized by someone and say, "Hey, I love you're on the show. Like, thank you so much." But like in Italy, it's like if somebody sees me in Rome or something like that, then they're like, "Oh my God!" And then it's like within half an hour, there's like a crowd of people, and they've all called their friends, and it's insane. It's very, very big in Italy, and Brazil as well. Brazil is a massive consumer of television and Grey's Anatomy and a lot of those other shows. So there's certain places where it's like you can't go anywhere with that kind of fandom, for sure.
It is amazing to me how it just changed so quickly for you. You know what I mean? Like from scrimping around, finding a few gigs. You were on Murdoch and all that stuff, but it got so huge so quickly, and then you become part of this other sort of massive TV moment. And I should reintroduce you here, I guess. My guest is Giacomo Gianniotti. Played the character Andrew DeLuca on Grey's Anatomy for 7 seasons. So I'm going to say this again, just in case you thought I was bluffing. Spoiler alert, if you haven't seen the last few episodes of Grey's, plug your ears. Otherwise, take a listen.
Is somebody going to call it?
So I'll ask the obvious. What did we just listen to?
You just listened to Khan, a fellow resident, call my time of death in the OR.
How do you find out that you're going to die on the show?
I don't know. I suppose it's different for everybody, but I was just sitting at home and I had a call from my executive producer, Debbie Allen, saying, come to the office, come by today. We want to talk to you. So I said, okay. And I stopped by, and Krista Vernoff, our showrunner, was also in the room, and we sat down, and they just said, hey, look, we've been trying a lot of different stories and arcs for this season. And we've kind of tried this 1,000 different ways, and we just kind of keep coming to the same conclusion that this is a beautiful story and we really want to tell it. And unfortunately, the story that we want to tell ends in DeLuca's demise. So I was like, what do you mean demise? Or like, yeah. And it's like, yeah, like, we had a really incredible response from our last season. At the end of the last season, there was an arc about a sex trafficker that had come into the hospital and brought a young girl, and she was trying to be treated and was posing to be her mother and all these kinds of things. And my character had basically discovered and surmised that it was a sex trafficker and that this girl was in trouble, even though she wasn't saying it, but she was showing all the signs. And nobody believed me because I was, struggling and mentally ill and, unhinged, as they were all saying. And so nobody believed me, but in the end, I was right. And this girl was, a prisoner to this trafficker. So it was a tremendous storyline that had a lot of success, and for good reason, because it's a huge, huge, huge issue in the world that we need to be talking about. And I'm glad that the writers were bringing it to the forefront. So they're like, we want to bring that story back. We want to close the circle on that story. We want to find that girl, and we want to get that sex trafficker, and we want to, get justice. And we want you to be a part of that storyline. And, you're going to die, but you're going to die a hero. You're going to save the girl. You're going to, get, all these people to save these other girls that are trapped and all these things. So I just thought it was a way to tell a really great story. And DeLuca got to die a hero. And I've been on the show for a long time, and I'm very excited and ready to do new things and certainly try more directing. And I just really didn't see any cons. I only saw pros. So
does it feel a bit different? Does it feel a bit different on set that day?
Sure. Yeah. And I think it was a bigger blow for my cast members than it was for me, to be honest. I think they were all really shocked to see me going, because we've all been working together for so long, and they were like, what? You know what I mean? We're so blindsided by this. And I was like, yeah, imagine how the fans are going to feel. But yeah, no. And during COVID, especially if your character doesn't interact with other characters, you might go through a whole year without seeing some of the other actors. But at least before COVID, every week we would have a read through where all the actors sit down, we read the new episode together. And then, before and after, you might chit chat and catch up with the actors that you don't get to work with. So there was always that kind of connection. But with COVID, we've been doing all the read throughs virtually. And so even that small bit of interaction has been kind of taken away. So there's a lot of cast members this season that I really haven't spent any time with, like zero. And so it's kind of hard imagining how I was going to kind of say goodbye and spend time with all of them. Yeah. And so getting the opportunity to direct was so amazing, because I got to spend, very intimate time with each one of my cast members, each one of my department heads, my crew. And so it was kind of this very indirect way of being able to say goodbye and spend time with all these people in a really long, drawn out way. I could really spend time. And I really enjoyed that. And it was like writing a little love letter to the show that I had spent so much time on, that I could have a little part in the creation of an episode of this show that I've been a part of for so long. So it was awesome. It was such a cool opportunity.
Can I ask you sort of an out there question that it may not have a satisfying answer, but I'm curious about it, because I spoke to a friend of mine recently who had to play a character in a casket. Like he had to be in the casket. Wow. And he said to me, it was hard not to think about your mortality.
Of course.
When you're lying in a casket. Does any of that cross your mind when you die on camera?
Yeah, I mean, certainly, I have all kinds of like leads hooked up to me, and I'm intubated, and I have IVs running to me. And even though it's all fake and there's nothing actually, going into my veins, it's all, but essentially like, there's a tube in my mouth, it's all, you are on an OR table. There's these lights overhead of you, and you all have surgeons around you. So yeah, I mean, it's sort of like you can't really get around that fact and how sort of real that does feel. But yeah, ultimately, yeah, it makes you think. And also, I had to lay on that table for a very long time. Like you're saying, your friend had to be in the casket for a while. So it's like you're kind of alone with your thoughts. No phones, no distractions, and you're just, you're left with your thoughts. And yeah, I guess certainly, my mortality probably came across my mind a couple times.
It just sounds, as someone who contemplates their own mortality just when they're going to bed, the idea of
maybe this is the last time I'll go to bed.
As someone who has that particular kind of anxiety, the idea of doing that, I got to say, it crossed my mind. What made you want to direct?
I've always had a fascination with directing. I've always had a curiosity to be behind the camera. I think it was probably it's funny because, like I said, I come from the theater, so I was used to being on stages, and I was used to really, doing that acting work where you would spend weeks rehearsing something and creating something together. And TV and film is just so quick and fast. And, you meet each other, you jump into bed and do a love scene, and it's like so weird. But yeah, for directing, I think when I was first starting to get those television and film jobs, a lot of like actors were interested in like, being on the set and looking at the actors. And I was way more fascinated with what I knew less about, which was the cameras and the technology and the monitors and the lenses and these directors. And so I guess over the years, I just sort of took note of that and was like, oh, wow, I seem to be much more fascinated with what's happening behind than ahead. Like, I wonder why that is, because I'm an actor. I should be much more fascinated with what's going, in front of the camera. But yeah, and I mean, the first episode that I did of Grey's Anatomy was directed by Kevin McKidd, another actor on the show. And then I started seeing that other, actors on the show had directed as well. And so I was like, I want to try that. You know what I mean? I've been wanting to try that for a really long time. And I think seeing some of the other actors on the show having directed gave me a lot of confidence in wanting to pursue that. And so I had talked to one of my executive producers about that. And, I spent a couple of years just working really hard, just studying a ton, taking a lot of courses and YouTube videos. And then I shadowed a ton. I took a lot of shadows of directors on different shows, just spending time with them and, literally just being a shadow, taking notes, asking questions, interviewing them. Why'd you do that? Why'd you do that? Why'd you have that actor enter from there? Like, why did you start on a close-up instead of your wide, or like all these different things. And so over these 3 years, I kind of sharpened my skills, and then told my executive producer, Debbie Allen, that I was ready. And she was like, okay, you can have an episode next season. And that was, this season. And yeah, it was everything I wanted it to be and more.
Does it change your acting now that you've been a director?
Yeah, definitely. It's funny you mentioned that, because I had a conversation with my cinematographer on the show of, he was talking about having worked with a director who was also a cinematographer. And he was saying how oftentimes when someone is sort of known as something and then they put on a different hat and they come to being a director, they often lose touch with the previous job. Because he was saying the cinematographer was creating all kinds of problems for him. And he was like, you're a cinematographer, you're a DP, like, you should know this. Why are you making my life so hard? And he's like, yeah, but I'm a director now. So I have to fight for creative decisions that might make your life difficult, but I can't care because I'm trying to accomplish something else. And similarly, like, for me being an actor, there was moments where I was like, God, I know this probably isn't the greatest for the actor, but I really need to make this choice and I really need to shoot it in this way for me. So I'm going to do what I can to make, the actor feel happy, but I do have to make some compromises. So yeah, it definitely gets you a greater appreciation for directing, because you realize when you're an actor and a director is asking you a certain thing that, it's bigger than just that moment. It's bigger than that.
It's been a joy to talk to you, Giacomo. We're airing this interview on the day of the season 17 finale. I don't have to tell you that there's been some speculation that this might be the series finale because people are starting to show up, like characters from the past are starting to show up in dream sequences and all that. I mean, there's a finality I'm feeling. Can I get anything from you on that?
Yeah, it certainly feels like that. But who knows? Yeah, I don't know. I don't think they've made a decision yet on that, unfortunately. And maybe by the time this airs, there will be. But I think they certainly could make this show, forever. I think it's sort of the genius that the sort of model or pattern or system that they've created in a way, it's sort of the backdrop is this medical drama, but, the writers are just bringing stories of cutting edge medicine and then socially relevant issues. And there's no shortage of socially relevant issues that we should be talking about or addressing. And so that kind of model could be carried forward, I think, for a very long time. But it's really up to the creatives, Ellen Pompeo, the lead actress, Krista Vernoff, the showrunner, all of the producers, like, do we want to keep making this? I know we can, but do we want to? You know what I mean? Do we want to start something new? So it's really up to them. I think the network probably would love for the show to continue for a long time. It's so successful.
Well, then I'll hedge my bets here in the extra here. I'm speaking with director Giacomo Gianniotti. You can stream the show Grey's Anatomy on Netflix. Of course, it's on ABC, where the blank finale will be airing tonight. He joined me here on Q. Thanks for your time.
Thank you so much. So nice talking to you.